So welcome to this session, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's an interesting subject to talk about governance. And I think the first two sessions, the one on COVID and the one Frank, my dear friend, had a fireside chat with the boss of FMDQ, revealed something about governance. The whole issue is about governance. How have we been able to manage COVID in the context of governance? You could see the institutional void and institutional failure. So what we're going to be discussing is, are we at the appropriate level of governance? Are we delivering services? So what I did was I looked up the World Bank's pillars, and it talks about 8 pillars: voice, which means the press has to have a voice. There has to be an opposition voice. Accountability of government, political stability, no violence, government effectiveness and efficiency, regulatory quality, rule of law, control of corruption. And I've added one: elite consensus. As you all know, you may agree or not agree, part of our problem is the failure of elite consensus to get a good governance framework. So these are the things I hope that we can share. People always talk about the fun days of Awolowo and Zeke and Saudana, and where are we today? I think we'll all agree that our dear country is extremely fragile. How can we, what are the lessons to learn from the past? So I'll direct the first question to Chief Philip Asiodu. As you all know, a distinguished public servant from the 60s to the 70s. So Chief Asiodu, when you look at the governance framework today and what it was when you were very active as a super permanent secretary, are there things we can learn from the past to improve the governance landscape today? We can't hear Chief Philip Asiodu. Sorry, can you all hear Chief Philip?
No, he's on mute.
Okay. You can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. I was saying it is a very, very sad situation because I entered just before independence into the civil service, and I ended with the coup of 75. But since then...
It's 1 o'clock.
Pardon?
No, don't worry, sir. Don't worry. Go on.
Since then, I had 3 occasions to go back as an advisor, economic advisor, in the second administration of Shehu Shagari, then in the Transitional Council of 1993, and then finally at the beginning of this last republic, this current republic in 99. And I could see terrible continuing degradation. Degradation in terms of competence, degradation in terms of willingness to work. You know, many governments can say what they like, plan very well, but the destruction of the public service in 1975, compounded again in 1988 with the so-called reforms of 1988, which were reversed in 1995. It's so painful. For instance, 1975, we abandoned planning. You know, the 75-80 plans, when we come to talk about it, you will see the significance and the projections then. They abandoned it, then they abandoned the discipline of planning, and then the traumatic purge of the public service brought in the idea of make hay while the sun shines. Since people were dismissed or retired without due process, whether you were good or bad, so that undermines. So long as you have this current situation where anything goes, corruption is rife from top to bottom. You can't deliver. So I think when we come to talk about that, structures are one thing. The attempts to retrain are there. But if the motivation and the leadership make it impossible to be honest, painstaking, you really can't progress. So whatever we do, we have to come back to how qualitatively to improve the people who have to deliver.
Right.
It's really the public ministries and agencies.
Thank you very much for that. I'll just make a couple of announcements. The first is that we're running a questions and answer program. And for the participants, if you have a question, please type it up and refer to a specific panelist. You need to go to slido.com to ask your question. When you get to slido.com, you would need to log in into a code, hashtag BD, capital B, capital D, small ANC 2020. I'll repeat that again. Hashtag capital B, capital D, small ANC 2020. We are also running an opinion poll, and the results may be announced in the context of this session or later, so keep that in mind. I think I have 5 panelists, because I have 7 on record here, but there are 5 panelists. And I see Governor Peter B next to Chief Asiodu. So I might as well ask him. Governor Peter B has spoken very eloquently on the question of governance, the cost of governance, limited government, efficiency of government. So Governor Peter B, perhaps you'd like to expand on your notion of limited government and reduction of the cost of governance, particularly in the context of this government now recognizing the need to implement the Rosayan report. Governor Peter B.
Well, thank you. I hope you're hearing me.
Yes, clear.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I listened to our father, Asiodu, when he spoke and everything. First, I have to start by if you look at what is happening in the country today, is a cumulative effect of leadership failure over the years. No matter how you try or whatever ideas or plans you have, if you have the type of leaders we have, and when I mean the leaders, myself included, because when I say leadership is not just the president or governor or this, cumulative, I'm talking about all the leadership, whether it's house, local government chairman. If you have the quality of leadership we have today in our country, you're not going to do anything. You're just a case of where you have a situation where you want to fly. Probably you have 10 planes that needs to fly, and probably you have 1 or 2 who are pilots, the rest are drivers. They don't know how to fly, so no matter what you do. So we have a situation where we need, our leadership selection process must change, and we have people who have the capacity, the competence, and everything. On issue what you're talking about costing and all that is not something, it's something you need to see, again, I said, across the various strata of government. If I use states, for example, to give you an example, because we always talk about federal government, of course, it needs to be aggressively, but look at the local government, look at the states. Let me use where we are now, like COVID-19. Every local government in this country receives every month about 100 million naira. At least every local government, every month. In the past 3 months, March, April, May, we have found ourselves in this situation. It cost only 15 million naira to set up a testing lab. And yet, some states don't even have testing lab till today. A ventilator costs only $20, about 10 million naira. We have a state without a ventilator, but the same state have Prado jeeps for the House of Assembly members. No, it doesn't happen anywhere in the world. So you can go on and on and on. I was just yesterday telling somebody that between year 2016 and year 2020, Nigerian budget for health is 1,896,000,000,000 naira. That is what we budgeted for health. And then if you add education, which was about 2.8 trillion, both of them was 4-point-something trillion, which is just about $12 billion. Where South Africa in 1 year budgeted for health, these 5 years, education and health put together, South Africa in 1 year budgeted only for health $17.6 billion. So our entire budget for 5 years is the most critical 2 areas. It's not up to South African budget for 1 year. If you listen to what Coco said now, that Egypt have provided, just last year, that Egypt have provided $12 billion for their SMEs. South Africa provided 5.5 billion. The only thing we have provided here is central bank 50 billion, which is $125 billion. So if you look at all this, I know you have wonderful panelists. Let me allow it, but if you look at all this, we're just not serious.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll now go to Aliyu Modibo.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Governor Peter Obi identifies a big governance void, which I think has been amplified by the coronavirus. Before, we thought we were, with a good health care infrastructure, but it took COVID to show there was nothing. What are the sort of things we can do to close this governance void? If you agree there's a void in the first place.
Thank you. Yes, there is a void. I think we have to start by critically looking into the recruitment process into public service. And when I say public service, I'm taking the whole spectra of service, civil service inclusive. So, and to also reduce this division or dichotomy between political authority and the central bureaucracy. There's this disconnect. Politicians or people with political authority are thinking this way, and the public servants, civil servants are thinking that way. Let me give you an example. When you take, people say that, planning has been thrown out of the window or so and so forth. Just, we keep repeating it. But I maintain that planning is going on, except that it's not the right way to plan. Planning is going on. Every year we have a budget. All the institutions, tiers of government, we have budgets. But the template for budgeting process has not changed since the 60s. We have not sat down and say, okay, we have this amount of money we want to spend on infrastructure. Which infrastructure? Is it health? Is it education? And then now, how do we do it? But now, if you have had an opportunity to serve in any of these political posts, either governor, minister, or whatever, and you are not careful, the budget comes to you, already the template is there. All you need to do is the civil servants will give it to you, and it is the same item, same subhead, same expenditure, the same thing that were bought, the same line vote will be there for them this year. So unless if you are careful, you don't take the budget, this bulky document, to look at it, and it has spilled into the National Assembly, who are even supposed to be a little bit more careful. Now, so the problem with us now is for us as a nation to sit down critically and examine the training institutions, You know, when you take our institutions of learning, for instance, they have not regenerated. You know, we have so many of them, hundreds of universities, but they're teaching the same thing. You know, there is no institution that you will go that you will be so shocked because they will pick one radical paradigm shift, you know, from the way we've been doing business. So I think really, if we can even have a summit instead of discussing this, whenever we make reference to summit or national conferences, let's have a conference, even if it is on a small scale, each area, each state or each municipality. Let's look at examine of why are things not working for us. Let's not waste too much time on talking about politics. I believe that the Nigerian life, the Nigerian situation is almost 80% on a daily basis occupied by political debates, not by developmental debates or economic debates, or how do we move forward from A to B. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think I would, if you can give me the screen so I can see all the panelists, please, because I can't see everybody. And I will assume that Mrs. Ike Mokwede is in the house. Am I correct? Mrs. Ike Mokwede. Hello?
I can't see him.
Yes, I'm here.
Right, okay.
Okay.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Great. I don't know if you can speak to, I mentioned a couple of things that the World Bank set out as pillars of good governance. And I talked about accountability. I talked about regulatory quality, transparency. There's a budget and it's not transparent, it's useless. It doesn't help governance. Part of the problem of Nigeria has been we budget money, but we don't know where it's going to. So what's your thought about that?
Well, I think a lot of the panelists have raised important points, and governance is at the center of the points that you have raised. If there is not proper governance, it doesn't matter what you budget, how you budget, what planning rules are in place, nothing is going to get done. And without proper governance, you see the challenges that we in Nigeria have faced. The issue that I think that a lot of people have failed to recognize is that we were able to be successful in the past, as Chief Osiodu has mentioned. The Nigerian public service, civil service, was very effective after independence and up until the 80s. And so what is the difference between what is happening now and what happened then? And I think a key factor is the lack of investment that we have made in governance and in the public servants. Now, one of the panelists talked about the quality of the public servants, and you have raised the issue of the lack of accountability. But if you compare all the systems that are in place in the civil service, for example, who are working with the training systems, performance management systems, the selection process, remuneration, all of these things are very weak. And if you have systems that are so weak, you will have civil servants and public servants who are not motivated. That is why they fall privy to corruption. That is why they have no interest in being effective in their jobs. So until we look at what it is we are doing with our civil servants and our public servants, until we start to invest in them, it doesn't matter what we say that we're doing, we're not going to get the results that we require. So for example, a director level civil servant who has had up to 30 years experience earns approximately 500,000 naira a month, which is the same as what a graduate who has 2 years experience is earning in the banking sector. So how can you expect a director, unless he has some intrinsic personal motivation or he has some funding from somewhere else, how can you expect him to do the job that he has been asked to do when he looks around and sees how neglected he is. So I think that when we're talking about governance, we need to look at the quality of the public servants and the civil servants who are supposed to be doing the job, and recognize the fact that if we do not invest in them, if we do not raise them to the level where they feel empowered, where they're properly trained so that they can be effective, we're not going to get the results that we're looking for.
Thank you so much. I'll come back to Governor Peter Obi, just to ask you, recently the president passed Executive Order 10. A lot of people said it was unconstitutional, but I thought it was good because it held the states accountable. The states are supposed to remit funds to an independent, because here I'm talking about strong institutions, remit money to a strong judiciary and a strong legislature, but they don't do that. So for me, the intent of the president was right. The intent in the COVID-19 management, whereby there's a lot of decentralization of power from the national to the states, is also right. So I just wondered whether the governance issue behind Order 10, which is decentralization, would help governance generally, by which I mean, is the federal government too strong? Would it help if the federal government and the states, and that's what I meant by elite consensus, could come to a new political arrangement whereby the 90 items of power in the exclusive list and the concurrent list, 68 are exclusive to the federal government, 30 is concurrent. In other words, the federal government can have a bite at one of the 30, and if it does so, it excludes the states, meaning that really the federal government controls all items. Things like driver's license, marriage certificate. Why should the federal government issue me with a marriage license? So I want to know, Governor Obi, whether you thought we ought to be looking for new political arrangements whereby we distribute power in a better way to create a better governance structure. I'm unable to see how the Inspector General of Police can effectively provide detection from Abuja. What do you think, sir?
Well, and I'm sure you know my stand on issue of restructure, that I support restructure 100%. I've said it repeatedly, even when people ask me about the so-called presidency, Igbo presidency, or something like that, and everything. I said to them, presently you have a car that has an engine fault. Changing the driver is not what should bother anybody unless you fix the engine. The country needs to restructure. Order 19, Order 10, or whatever that came out of it. Yes, I support the fact that we have to have the executive order. The executive order was necessary because we needed to have proper funding, especially to the judiciary. Judiciary should not be at stake and whatever it is of the governors in the states, especially to the judiciary. But what I see always that we're always thinking about how to share. We need to spend more time on how to create wealth, how to put in place things that will make the country to grow economically. And that is the order I want to see, the executive order about savings. I want to see executive order that is saying this amount must be invested in so and so. I want to see executive order saying if we must borrow money, it must be for investment, not for consumption. That's the order the country needs.
Thank you. So, Aliyu, what do you think will help improve the governance process?
Olisa, I don't know whether I've been dropped from the panel.
Ah, I'm so sorry.
I thought we were going through the panelists.
I'm so sorry. Because I was looking at the screen, and unfortunately, I didn't see you. Because I have your name here, but I didn't see you. So I would ask you to come in, please. I'm very sorry. I apologize.
Is that also the case with me, Olisa? My name is Obi Ezekwesili.
Oh dear.
I think Olisa doesn't have a list, so
The list. Yeah.
he's going by who he can see.
I have the list, but I didn't see Jibril nor Obi. I apologize for that. I really apologize. So, Professor Jibril Ibrahim, welcome. And I'm sorry that I omitted you. I don't know whether Bashar J.K. Randall is on the panel, is he?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Wow. Okay, what I'll do, Jibril, let me start with Bashar J.K. Randall, and then I'll come to you, and then I'll go to my very good sister, Obi. So, Bashar, your very good friend, Chief Philip Asiodu, was telling us about the days of old, because we're discussing governance in the context of COVID. The first panel dealt with the structures of COVID, how it has progressed, and I identified immediately some governance questions. So, in order to rebuild the governance process, I'd like to hear from you what you recall of the past, Zeke, Awolowo, Saudana. What is it that we can learn from what they did when they governed Nigeria in the 60s?
Well, you are right on the button when you refer to Chief Philip Asiodu. What you may not know is that he grew up on Andrew Street in Lagos, which was right next to Tokumbo and Rika Street, where I grew up. So we both grew up in the same environment, more or less. But much more importantly, in the old days, Zeke, Awolowo, Sadana, even the Governor General of Nigeria, they were accessible. Unknown to the present generation, there was a telephone directory of everybody, from Governor General, Inspector General of Police, Chief of Army Staff. It listed their address as well as their telephone numbers. And I remember, even as a sixth former, I sent a letter to the Prime Minister that I would like to come and interview him for my college magazine. And I got a reply within a week that by all means I was welcome. That was Nigeria of those days. Even when Chief Asiodu was permanent secretary and held one of the most important positions in government, if you couldn't catch up with him in his office, he was at the tennis court virtually every day. So if you had matters of importance that you wanted to discuss with him about the Nigerian economy or the policy he was advocating, he was more than happy to discuss with you. And the same went through the entire system. Cabinet office was a beehive. People like, there was a gentleman called Alhaji Abubakar, and he had assistants like Patrick Deleko working with him. The official closing hour was 3 o'clock, but you are welcome to come and chat with them anytime after 3 o'clock, and they stay till 6, 7, and by way of entertainment, all they offered were groundnuts in those days, because they felt that everybody had a stake in the policy making. So let us now address a very fundamental issue. No country can be greater than the sum total of all its citizens. I repeat it, no country can be greater than the sum total of all its citizens. So you cannot expect to be judged by the quality of the likes of Chief Agbakoba or the likes of Chief Asudu or any Zekwesili or former Governor Obi, we have to drag everybody from the bottom up. And that has been a problem. When we used to plan, we plan for everybody. But now you have a situation where all sorts of projects end up in the plan, but nobody ever asks, where's the budget? Where is the policy to support it? And we've just been going round and round in circles. What we are now dealing with is not just a crisis of monumental dimension regarding the first wave of the coronavirus and the consequential disruption. We now have to contend with the prospects or aftershock of an imminent second wave, together with the threat of a far more virulent strain. Sadly, even more worrisome is what will appear to be lingering complacency in the interval between the first wave and the second wave. And that's why we are now. Granted, we were caught unawares by the first outbreak in March. Some of the states, Lagos in particular, quickly delivered a robust response. Perhaps some element of fatigue has crept in, not necessarily on the part of the government, but more on the part of the citizenry, largely on account of the long period of forced hibernation, incarceration at home, especially those denizens of the informal economy or black market who depend on their meager resources, which must be replenished on a daily basis for their survival as well as that of their dependents. Even doctors are exasperated as the new strain apparently kills within 4 to 7 days, subject to confirmation by the World Health Organization, with symptoms resembling esophagitis, but more aggressive and fatal. But the victims and non-victims are trapped in stasis and marooned in a toxic environment dominated by mixed messages between international data and statistics and information being relayed locally. Even within our own borders, there are conflicts between what the federal government has announced and the defiant posture by some of the states, particularly Kano, Kogi, Cross River, and River states. We appear to have been caught off guard, even as we clamor for a return to normal. Reality compels us to redefine the new normal. For sure, things will never be the same again. We are almost overwhelmed by glaring evidence that in spite of all the zeal and resources invested in convincing all and sundry that COVID-19 is real, a significant percentage are in denial. This is derived from long-standing mistrust, deep-seated resentment, and outright cynicism. Even when palliatives were being distributed by politicians in the midst of the pandemic, the response from the beneficiaries, instead of gratitude and appreciation, was to carry out a double check among themselves. Is another election imminent? That is the only time the government and politicians remember we exist. As Mother Teresa pointed out, the feeling of being unwanted is the most terrible poverty. The figures we are contending with are staggering. As we speak, 8 million people have been infected globally. In the United States of America alone, the computer model of Johns Hopkins University is projecting 150,000 deaths in 1 month's time. In our own case, we are still battling with conflicting data, statistics, as well as what will appear to be discrepancies generated by a combination of unreliable tests and faulty testing equipment. And even if you look at the front page of today's Business Day, it says very clearly that our debt service ratio is now close to 100%. Debt service ratio of 100%. How do we go with that? That is a huge challenge. And if you look at yesterday's papers, one of the headline of one of the papers was that importers has lost 15 trillion at the ports in the last 3 months. And the same thing for the budget. We have a situation where the government is not ready to slash down on its recurrent expenditure. It's not ready to compromise on the capital expenditure. So what you have is massive borrowing. But when you borrow massively, two things are likely to happen. Your foreign exchange, you have foreign exchange issues. Then on top of that, capital flight. And on top, in addition, you are going to have to deal, with this disruption in your economy. Not least of course, that you even run out of money.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Bashir. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you if we have more time. So I'll go to Professor Ibrahim. Participants, Jibrin runs one of the most efficient and leading centers for democracy and development. He's a good friend of mine, old friend, part of the pro-democracy movement back in the day. Jibrin, I don't know, I'm sure you've listened, although I missed you, I apologize again. Yeah. But what do you think in terms of the governance model? I know you've done a lot of studies on this. What would be your recommendation for a model governance situation for Nigeria, having listened to a lot of the panelists?
Well, my sense is that it's not really a question of a better governance model. It's much more a question of understanding what's the governance system and seeing what results such a governance system produces. Our Constitution says the purpose of governance is the security and welfare of the people. What COVID does is that it shows you there is no relationship between governance and the welfare and security of the people. Two states in this country, Kogi and Cross River, declare there is no COVID-19 in their states because it makes them look good if there is no COVID-19. In both states, the medical association say we are getting patients with COVID-19 every day. Don't tell us it doesn't exist. We should work out how to take care of these COVID patients. This has been going on for 2 months, and nobody in the system will say these two governors are basically irresponsible and are doing the exact opposite of what the Constitution says they should do, provide for the welfare and security of the people. When you look, therefore, at our system of governance, it produces opportunities for politicians, except, of course, Mr. Obi, to go in and ransack the government for their personal aggrandizement. I recall when a certain kidnapper called Evans was arrested and he was interviewed by journalists. Why are you collecting so much money from your victims? And he says, oh, I have an ambition. I want to be the governor of my state. So I know that to be governor, you need to have a huge war chest. So I'm just preparing for that eventuality, which means governance is not about serving the people. And I think when governance gets to the stage it has in Nigeria, you have to identify what's broken. And what's broken is simple and straightforward. The accountability mechanism between the citizen and those who exercise power on their behalf. And I think when we look at our 21 years of democracy, two key events were important. The 2003 election, 2007 election, when the Nigerian political class showed the Nigerian people that we are not going to be in power because you voted for us. We are going to be in power because we have other means of overriding you and excising power. This means they don't have any responsibility to Nigerian system. So I'm saying even if we have a better model theoretically, once you don't go back to that essence of what's the purpose of governance and what types of people are supposed to exercise governance and what should above all be the content of that governance that's serving the welfare and security of the people of the country, then we'll be wasting our time.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Now, my dear sister, Obi Ezekwesili, well-known pro-democracy fighter, we both go back and
Thank you very much, Olisa. And hello to all the co-panelists. Olisa, the theme that I was given for this event is called Governance and Optimizing Nigeria's Response to COVID-19. And I looking at it from that very concise interest and weaving in your question on corruption. I think that the very important point to make is that Nigeria's poor governance is correlated to Nigeria's poor governance of natural resource. And natural resource that we predominantly have is, well, at least up to using at the moment is oil. And the poor governance of the petroleum sector could be a proxy for the poor governance of the entity called Nigeria. And the reason is not far-fetched. In the work of political economy of natural resources, we have often seen that the political class of countries where there is natural resources endowment have a fetish for turning governance into a series of transactions that are built around that particular commodity. And so just imagine Nigeria sans oil. We would not be discussing a whole lot of the things we spend our time discussing in our country. Therefore, it is important to identify that until we can get good governance of the petroleum sector, of the oil and gas sector, of the natural resources sector of our society, it is impossible for us to have a political class that would do the kinds of things that Jibo so brilliantly articulated. The leitmotif of government in anywhere, whether poor, whether rich country, is to improve the quality of life of citizens. In natural resources rich societies where the systems of governance of the commodity have not been well articulated, what you tend to see is that there is a complete compromise of the quality of life of the citizens. And so the expert panel of the Natural Resources Charter, Nigerian Natural Resources Charter that I belong to, has spent a lot of time doing some concisive work in the area of better governance of the oil economy. And number one thing that we need to do is that we need to understand that we have to focus on the longer term perspective. The longer term perspective means a future generation perspective. And that we have not done well. And we see that clearly during the COVID. We are not able to, even in the short term, respond to the tension that exists between life and livelihood. And because we did not build for the longer term. And so we're not able to respond to crises such as COVID. So number two thing is there is going to be a next normal that is already upon us. Not even the new normal. There will be a next normal because the series of crises that would follow the new world would mean that health issues are going to be crises that we cannot envisage so quickly, but we must have systems that can respond to them. So the number three thing becomes, how do we optimize the resources of natural the proceeds of natural resources in ways that we translate them quickly to human capital and to critical infrastructure, that is a formation of physical capital that is necessary to provide a basis for your citizens to have quality of life. Number 4 point then becomes, why is it that many decades after and learning the lesson that we must use natural resources in a way that adds value to the economy through diversification of earnings, we haven't done it? We haven't done it because we haven't found a constitutional mandate for ensuring that an arrangement enables a smoothing of expenditure when the volatility of the pricing of natural resources comes upon us. And so constitutional provision has to be made for how we govern the proceeds from oil so that we have it in the way that it is not left to the capriciousness of a political class that has zero incentive to use the proceeds of natural resources for the betterment of the lives of citizens. And my final point before I stop is that for us, the diversification agenda has always been a rhetorical agenda. It's all about the rhetorics of we have to diversify the economy. Now, why is it that the government after government has not succeeded in doing this? It has not succeeded in doing this because the citizens themselves have not created a demand pressure on governments to insist that there is a result that is acceptable. There is a quality of outcome in governance below which citizens will not accept. And to that extent, therefore, when governments don't produce results, there is absolutely no consequence. So it goes back to the issue that with this kind of political class, you need to have very strong citizen engagement that is based on analytical data advocacy to show that we are not governing in the way that we should govern because we're not focusing on the right policies, we're not building the right institutions, we're not investing in the right priorities that enable inclusive growth that would be beneficial to citizens. So if we don't do this and bring citizens into the center of this conversation, then what would happen is that we're going to meet the next set of crises, and then we would again repeat the pattern of being caught flat-footed. I stop here and wait for any further questions.
Thanks so much, Obi, my darling friend. Thank you so much. Let me remind the participants to go to hashtag capital B, B for baby, capital B, capital D, David, small ANC 2020. It's in the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and take part in the polling that is going on. We don't have much time. I've been advised by the conference director that our time is very limited and I need to go to the Q&A. Some people have sent in questions. So Aliyu, a question for you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Someone is suggesting that maybe a better governance model would be to reconsider a parliamentary system which is more inclusive. What are your thoughts in a minute?
I think it's too late for us to start from ground zero again, or start all over again. Even though I do like the parliamentary system, but I think what we need to do is just build on what we have already. And since I have this opportunity, let me just echo that it is not all that hopeless. And I want us to, whenever we discuss critical issues like this, to look at the other positive things that have come out, even in the management of this COVID-19. When you take, for example, some of the fantastic, management that is going on in Lagos, consider a city of almost 20 million. And you can see from the governor down to the officials, that everybody is trying his best. Same thing here in Abuja. Since I am the chairman of the ministerial committee on COVID-19 and I left, active government service 13 years ago, I'm re-engaging with some of these public civil servants. I'm really impressed with the doctors, with the nurses, with the, officials. You know, we started from a scratch with no facilities at all in Abuja, but now we have even a redundancy, you know, of bed capacity, because within a short time we could create, you know, 1,000 beds in less than 2 months, you know, with, you know, different, you know, initiatives going on. So I think we also have to, no matter even if there's small snippets of, you know, progress, we must accentuate that. We must say that some people are doing well, and that is the way to go, you know, and we have to encourage, you know, the good behavior, and then perhaps, you know, discourage, you know, negative or bad behavior. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Governor Peter Obi, a question for you. We all keep talking about the Nigerian problem. What, if you had the opportunity, would you do specifically to fix the Nigerian problem?
Well, I think this is let me just say what, just follow up from what Aliu said. I agree with Aliu that there's this sympathy here. That's why I said that, yes, there might be a situation where you have 10% or even 20 that are doing it the right way, but that is, we need the critical mass of people and everything. Everybody knows what other countries have been able to do in order to be where they are. It's not a rocket science. We were signatory in the year 2000 to Millennium Development Goals. We are signatory to it. China did not do any other thing, neither India. What they did is that they mainstreamed that agenda in their development plan and followed it strictly. And within that period, like I've always said, we're able to pull 439 million people out of poverty. The same thing happened in India. But within the same period, we've been able to put millions of people into poverty. And it's still happening today. And they follow up to that, which is the sustainability agenda. We're not following it. And I use my little experience, just very little experience. When I became the governor of Anambra State, on education alone, the first year, we were number 26 on NECO and WAEC. Second year, we were number 25. And I called the commissioner and said, listen, before I leave this place, we must be among the best 10. We didn't go to be the number 1. So whatever it takes for us to be among the best 10, we must do it. We must, since MDG is about fighting extreme poverty, education and health, we must invest in these 3 items, and it must work. Of course, I don't need to tell you what happened because you happen to come from Anambra State. In 2011, 12, and 13, we are number 1, both in WAEC and NECO. And I don't think anybody today can say, in terms of even cutoff point, we remain the highest. In health, similar thing happened. We had a situation where we didn't have no single school of nursing, no single school of midwifery was accredited and functional. But we have voluntary agencies, churches, that have schools of nursing in places where like Iyenu, Boromeo, everything owned by the churches. We went and partnered with them, invested in it. By the time I was leaving office, we have 14 institutions that were in that area, because we talk about primary health care and you don't have the people. So you can go on and on, the rest is for you to look about. I'm not saying if I have opportunity, what I keep saying is that we need the quality of political leadership in Nigeria is too low as it is today. No matter what you do, if you get your politics wrong, then it is wrong. What we have today is a case of where lunatics are in charge of the asylum. We need to fix it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Governor Peter. Chief Philip Asiodu, but I was going to go. So, Obi, please, if you stand ready to just sort of like give us a 2-minute, wrap up of what we've been saying. But I must call my uncle to say something.
Just quickly.
Yes.
Following from what Governor Obi has just said, and Professor Jibrin and Aliu, please, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We must, and I was very sad to hear the centrality given to governance of oil resources. If the projections we had been followed, by now oil will just be 30% contributor to our revenues. Let us please go back to the plans of 70, 74, 75, 80, Division 2010. Update it. What is important is to force people, as Governor Diaz said, do the things which have been identified. And in those places, in those two plants, started by saying oil was a wasting asset. So people were not going to be concerned with the present process to come and share oil. Let us please go back. The specific projects in agriculture, take it all the way to agro-allied industrialization, education, health, all these things are there. We should please stop making budgets, just making noise. There's so many trillions, nothing identified, no place, not where the projects will be, costing and all that. I think we should go back to the process of hard work, identify what we must do and do it. And eventually, you will find that if we are empowered, you remember before independence, all the farm settlement schemes, the reason palms, these were done by Nigerians, and we can go back to that. We must go back, be more specific, identify projects, train people to do it, and let governments agree that these are the important things. Because if you ask anybody, what does he want? Shelter, food, education for his children, wherever he is. Let us please go back to those basics and reintroduce merit, competence, performance, and integrity. This arithmetical quota has done us what it has done to us. And we see that in every sector, we're ill-prepared. But before the next round comes, let us see how we can persuade ourselves to go back to simple hard work. And finally, you remember that in 1962, when they first produced the post-independence plan, Balewa, Opara, Sadwana, all the politicians took 10% salary cut to signal the need for savings. We really have enough money if we deploy it properly. And in some places, I have suggested secretly, I've suggested publicly, what should be the salary structure from president downwards. What we have now is most unfair, most wasteful. So please, when we talk about these things, we don't need rocket science. We should just go back to simple, honest hard work and select and perform.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's a question for you, although we're really out of time. But the question, says that you are a shining beacon and hope for Nigeria. And I think I agree with that comment. But the question is, do you think there are too many states and that it hinders governance? So I would like you to wrap this around some of the closing thoughts that you have. So, and unfortunately, participants, I'm sorry, lots of questions, very good questions, but there is no time to take everything. But I touched on some of the key ones. So, Obi, can you hear me?
Is that me? Okay. Yes.
Did you hear
first, I wanted to.
Okay. Did you hear me?
I'd like to say that I'd like to say that the centrality of oil is the creation and design of our political class. They have not been able to think beyond oil as a basis for governance of the country. And so the case that we're making is that if you can move this matter of governance of oil out of the realm of capricious personal design, where any president can decide that he, instead of just focusing on being president of Nigeria, he cares to be governing the petroleum sector. That's rubbish. That's utter rubbish. We should get to the place where we have the system and the structure, the incentive for the private sector. We deregulate that sector, just hive off all of these unproductive assets, because that way we would minimize the interest of a rentier political class in the politics of the country. So that's number one. Number two is that, you know, the level of what satisfies you is the extent of what you celebrate. It's unfortunate that a number of the people in our political class want to celebrate average and mediocrity for excellence. I dare not do that, because we have too many of our citizens that are left in poverty, stuck in poverty, and for a long time are going to be in intergenerational dynasty of poverty. We cannot celebrate as though we have done some great things. I believe that it is urgent for us to use the post-COVID period to simply question everything. We need to dismantle all structures and systems that are not working for us, and we need to create structures and systems that take us into the rest of the 21st century on the basis of the primacy of productivity and competitiveness of our economy as a basis for making sure that we have prosperity that is inclusive and that we can build a stable society. And finally, I want to say that there is no group that has an incentive for the change of this country right now more than the society at large, meaning the citizens. The citizens must be at the center of deciding what quality of governance we want in Nigeria. The politicians have no incentive to give it to you. The technocratic class in the public sector or in the civil service have no incentive to give it to you. But the citizens who are getting the rough end of the stick can become the collective action that would demand for a conversation around what kind of a structure of Nigeria would be very inclusive, that would provide equality of opportunity for everyone to thrive, for every region to thrive, for every individual Nigerian, whether male or female, whether Christian or Muslim. We need to optimize our diversity, but we can only do that when the citizens take charge of this conversation. Right now, it isn't working because citizens are yet sleeping.
you.